Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot onto the polished marble of a Roman villa, where the air smells faintly of myrrh, the candles flicker like half-lidded eyes, and somewhere, just beyond the atrium, a soft harp begins to play. You're here for a banquet, but it's not just about eating. This is a stage, a ritual, a performance of power, clothed in velvet and perfumed oils. You don't just attend a Roman elite feast, you offer yourself to it. And you probably won't survive this, at least not with your reputation intact. You arrive just before sundown, carried through the city's dusty streets in a litter that's far too extravagant for someone of your actual rank. But that's the point. You've borrowed a friend's slave, rented a more opulent toga, even dabbed a drop of imported saffron behind your ears. Because tonight isn't just a dinner party, it's a declaration. And every Roman elite knows, the moment you step through the threshold, you're already being watched. At the entrance, a servant, bare-chested, glistening with oil and barely older than 16, kneels to remove your sandals. You try not to wobble as he brushes your foot clean with rose water. Across the atrium, you catch eyes with another guest. Someone much higher in status, cloaked in Tyrian purple, and draped in the lazy confidence of someone who's hosted more of these than you've attended. They don't smile. They assess. 1 second, 2, then a nod. You've been acknowledged, and that, in this world, is everything. Our host's home is a projection of power. Mosaic floors whisper of old money. Statues of gods, Venus lounging here, Bacchus reclining there. Signal tastes both divine and carnal. There's a fountain burbling gently, not for thirst, but for atmosphere. Even the slaves are arranged like furniture. Beautiful, silent, hyper-aware. Their job tonight isn't just to serve food, it's to reflect the glory of their master. You pass beneath a heavy silk curtain into the peristyle, where the convivium, the banquet proper, awaits. Reclining couches form a horseshoe around low tables. Each position is a coded message. You've been placed center left, not close enough to speak directly to the host, but close enough that others will see you're in favor. Historians still argue whether seating arrangements were always this deliberate. But let's be honest, this is Rome. Of course they were. You recline with as much practiced ease as you can manage. One elbow down, feet outstretched, sandals long gone. Another servant offers you a citrus-scented cloth to dab your face, though you notice he presses the same cloth to his own cheek first, an oddly intimate gesture. A game? A test? You return the motion, just in case. Conversations ripple. A senator with lips stained dark from wine is whispering into the ear of someone too young to be his wife. A matron with hair piled into an architectural feat of pins and pearls surveys the room as if selecting a target. It's not yet dark, but the boundaries are already softening. You sip watered wine from a cup etched with erotic scenes. Standard issue at these events. The imagery isn't scandalous, it's expected. Roman elites didn't separate appetite from authority. If anything, they believed indulging both was proof of mastery. Pleasure, for them, was a demonstration of control. A philosopher to your left drones about stoicism, quoting Seneca between bites of pomegranate. But you barely listen, because across the table, a young man in a sheer tunic just shifted a little too slowly, and the host's wife didn't look away fast enough. There's a language here, unspoken but fluent. You're beginning to understand it. We don't know exactly how many of these convivias spiraled into what the poets coyly called games, but enough graffiti, letters, and satirical plays survived to suggest that things often got slippery after the second course. One fringe theory even suggests that certain villas were designed with false walls and hidden passageways. Not for eavesdropping spies, but for discreet midnight exits. You glance at the marble wall to your right. It does seem oddly hollow, and yet, beneath the sensuality is something colder. This isn't just flirtation. It's surveillance. Every touch is a calculation. Every compliment might be repeated tomorrow in a bathhouse or Senate corridor. Someone's daughter is being watched for marriage potential. Someone else's lover is being paraded like a stolen trophy. You're not sure yet which part you're playing, but you're here. Reclined, oiled, observed. Your presence tonight is already a kind of performance, and the curtain hasn't even lifted. The first dish arrives not with a whisper, but with a spectacle. A silver tray, held aloft by two trembling slaves, glides between the couches. Upon it, a whole peacock, roasted, reassembled, and refeathered, its neck arched in eternal vanity, its tail fanned out like some divine offering. No one reaches for it yet. This isn't food, it's a message. And the message is, I can afford to waste magnificence. You're not even hungry, but that's irrelevant. In a Roman elite banquet, the food isn't about sustenance. It's about performance. And you're not here to eat. You're here to witness, to understand the pecking order, not through speeches, but through spice blends, cutlery, and who gets served first. The host's steward, an older man with a face like weathered parchment and a tunic far too fine for his rank, begins announcing the courses as if listing royal titles. Stuffed dormice with honey and poppy seed, he intones. Grilled sow's udder. Cuttlefish in garum jelly. Each dish more elaborate than the last. Each one served with a flourish that practically demands applause. A bowl is placed before you. Lentils stewed in cumin, cinnamon, and pine nuts. Simple, yet scented with ingredients from 3 continents. You take a bite. It's warm, earthy, almost sweet. But again, taste isn't the point. Somewhere in that flavor is a map of trade routes, conquests, and taxes wrung from provinces you'll never see. Historians agree that Roman cuisine at elite banquets was as much a political display as a culinary one. Exotic ingredients were proof of empire. You weren't just eating. A fig imported from Syria was like chewing on a boundary line. A dab of Indian pepper? That was the East, tamed and sprinkled over your fish. And then there's the wine. Oh, the wine. It never stops flowing and never arrives alone. Every amphora opened is accompanied by a story. This one comes from a Greek island no one can afford. Someone brags. You smile politely. Your cup, subtly gilded, fills and refills without request. At one point, you swear the wine tastes faintly of violets and chalk. A whispered explanation, marble dust, a fashionable addition, supposedly enhances virility. Supposedly. Another cup. You're starting to feel it now. That fuzzy edge behind your eyes, the loosened shoulders, the temptation to say something stupid and charming. Across the table, a girl you've never met before, barefoot, crowned with myrtle leaves, catches your gaze and raises her glass. She can't be older than 16. You raise yours back. She winks. Was it sincere? Or is she another hired performer in disguise? That's part of the magic, or the danger. In many banquets, especially those drifting into more scandalous territory, hired actors, musicians, and even sex workers mingled freely with guests. Some were dressed like gods. Others recited poetry from under the table. One fringe tidbit from Petronius hints at hosts who staged full mythological plays mid-dinner, complete with nudity, role-swapping, and staged divine unions. No one quite agrees whether these were common, rare, or simply exaggerated gossip. But you'd believe anything in this moment. Even Venus walking through that curtain wouldn't seem out of place, and that curtain does part. A trio of dancers steps lightly onto the mosaic floor. Golden ankle bells chime softly. Their movements are slow, serpentine, impossible to ignore. Their tunics are sheer, their faces painted with saffron and ash, their eyes lined thick with coal. They aren't just dancing, they're narrating a scene, a seduction, a conquest, a marriage, maybe, or a betrayal. You lean forward without meaning to. So does half the room. But again, this isn't just titillation. It's politics. The dancers were hired, yes, but who they mimic, what they represent, can be a veiled commentary. A nod to a recent scandal, a parody of a rival. One performer raises a dagger to her heart, eyes wide in faux despair, and a few guests chuckle knowingly. You don't get the joke. That probably means it was about someone important. There's always a subtext. Even the tableware whispers secrets. Plates etched with lines tearing at deer. Cups showing gods lounging among mortals. A salt cellar shaped like a reclining Venus. It's beautiful, but it's also instructional. This is what power looks like. This is what submission looks like. Choose wisely. A newer guest, bold, perhaps too bold, attempts to comment on the host's choice of figs. Syrian, I assume, he ventures, loud enough for half the room to hear. The host raises a brow. No. Egyptian. The correction is soft but final. The guest flushes. A minor misstep, but noted. You suspect that man won't be invited back soon. These are the stakes. Not war, not debate, but figs. The dancers retreat. The harp starts again. And the scent of roasted pheasant drifts in behind another curtain. You realize you've been sitting in the same position for over an hour, elbow sore, toes tingling. But to shift too much would signal discomfort, and discomfort signals weakness. So you hold the pose. There's a bowl of pomegranate seeds in front of you now. You eat slowly, deliberately, one seed at a time. Because in this room you don't just consume, you are consumed. It starts with a shimmer, a flash of light on a gold bracelet, a silk hem slipping just an inch too far as the guest leans for olives. One moment, the room is all clinking goblets and laughter. The next, it's charged. Not loud, not crude, but unmistakably humming with something warmer, slower, and more deliberate. You've reached the middle of the banquet. This is where the real politics begin. And the real politics, in Rome, often begin with skin. The lighting helps. Oil lamps flicker gently from the walls, casting everything in a golden, forgiving haze. The heat of so many bodies in close proximity, reclining together on shared couches, seems to melt time a little. The air is thick with rose, cinnamon, and sweat. You notice how everyone starts to glisten, on purpose. Roman banquet rooms weren't designed for comfort. They were designed for display. Across from you, a young man adjusts his tunic, and it slips to reveal a shoulder polished to a glow. Not a mistake. Not modesty either. This is a practiced gesture, one you'll see repeated tonight in countless small variations. Fabric as choreography, and you begin to wonder what you're communicating just by how you breathe. Roman fashion for the elite was never just about clothing. It was about meaning. Your tunics dye, expensive or fake. Your jewelry, subtle or arrogant. The way your belt is tied, tight at the waist could signal confidence or hunger, depending on who's reading. Historians still argue whether certain color pairings held encoded meanings. Purple and green, for instance, might have implied something about loyalty or licentiousness, depending on the century. You're not sure what yours say, but the host's wife has glanced at you twice now. Once at your ring, once at your ankle. Make of that what you will. Another course arrives. A pyramid of soft cheese sculpted to resemble Mount Vesuvius, gently steaming, with a tiny olive placed at its peak. Someone makes a double entendre. You laugh, appropriately, not too loud. You're getting better at this. Then someone to your left, he's a poet apparently, and very pleased with himself, leans in and recites something vulgar in Greek. You're not fluent, but you catch the words for thigh and honey. A ripple of laughter moves down the couches, polite but charged. Someone taps the side of their wine cup 3 times. That means they're enjoying the mood. A guest across the way responds with a slow stroke of their collarbone. You're in it now. The boundaries between attire and body begin to blur. Roman banquet etiquette encouraged relaxation, but also spectacle. Tunics loosen, togas slip, ankles are shown, not accidentally, and hands brush, then linger. The body becomes part of the political toolkit. A well-oiled forearm might open more doors than a letter of introduction. One scholar once described Roman elite banquets as intimate public performances, where sensuality was expected, but never explicit. It had to be deniable, deflectable, dressed up in metaphors and raised eyebrows. If someone accused you of being suggestive, you could always claim misinterpretation. But everyone knew the truth lived in the silences. There's a tradition, rare but real, of guests arriving to these banquets wearing transparent tunics made of silk, so fine they barely count as clothing. A fringe tidbit from a letter by Marshall suggests that at least one consul's son appeared at a feast dressed like the goddess Diana caught bathing. Whether this was a scandal or a trend is unclear, but judging from tonight's crowd, it's likely both. Someone toasts to Venus, the goddess of love, yes, but also of luck and persuasion. An older woman on your right, dressed in seafoam green, her silver hair in tight coils, raises her glass and murmurs something about divine hunger. You don't dare ask what she means. The harpist changes rhythm. Slower now. Hypnotic. A few guests get up from their couches, not to leave, but to stretch, or preen, or pose. The room doesn't stop them. In fact, it seems to bend around them. The host's cousin, barefoot, laughing, too bold by half, drapes himself across the lap of a visiting magistrate. The magistrate pretends to protest, but doesn't move. Someone claps once. It's unclear if it's encouragement or permission. You try not to look surprised. In Rome, sex was less about love and more about position, both socially and otherwise. What mattered wasn't who you desired, but how and in what role. Dominance was expected. Submissiveness was fine, if you were lower in status. To reverse that dynamic was to invite mockery, or worse. But desire itself, that was everywhere. It's not just about seduction. It's about opportunity. A senator might notice a young dancer and arrange a discreet meeting later. A noblewoman might whisper something to a guest that leads to marriage, or scandal, or both. You're part of this web now. The way your knee brushes the edge of the next couch. The faint smile you give to the wine pourer who touches your wrist just a little too long. You don't need to act, you just need to suggest, just need to. A slave enters, holding a tray of pomegranate seeds and slices of fig arranged in a very deliberate shape. A few guests chuckle. You blush before you even recognize the implication, then you eat one anyway. You realize suddenly how easy it is to forget the outside world here. The streets of Rome, the daily grind of grain rations, Senate hearings, household gods. In this candlelit cocoon, Everything is warmth, oil, music, scent. Even time seems suspended. And yet, beneath the softness, the laughter, the touch, there's a sharpness, a sense that every exposed shoulder, every suggestive toast, every laugh that lasts just a second too long, matters. This isn't just sensuality, it's strategy. The wine has changed. Again. You barely noticed. This one is darker, richer, with a sweetness that sticks to your tongue like molasses. It's being poured less frequently now, but more deliberately, as if rationed to heighten effect. The steward who hands you your next cup leans in as he does so. You feel his breath on your neck. A smile, a warning, hard to tell. Conversation, once lively, has settled into a murmur. Not silence, just a new rhythm. Softer, slower, more precise. Jokes are now hushed inside veiled phrases. Names are dropped mid-sentence and picked up with raised eyebrows. No one speaks plainly. Not anymore. You begin to realize that the true banquet doesn't happen with food or music. It's happening now. Flirtation, before playful, almost performative, is now intentional. Someone touches your cup, though their own is full. Another brushes your knee under the table. A third, reclining 2 seats over, speaks only in questions and compliments. You don't respond. Or maybe you do, just by not refusing. The Roman elite excelled in a specific kind of social magic, turning suggestion into certainty without ever saying a word. Historians still argue whether seduction at banquets was spontaneous or orchestrated, but they tend to agree on one thing. Sex, if it happened, was never the point. Power was, and the two were almost always entangled. Across from you, 2 guests are locked in a conversation so quiet, you can only read it on their faces. One nods, the other smiles, then leans back, fingers trailing across the arm of their couch like punctuation. An agreement has been made. Not verbal, not official, but real. Maybe it's about an estate in Gaul. Maybe it's about a marriage arrangement. Maybe it's about meeting later, when the torches burn lower. You think of your own position tonight, mid-tier couch, good wine. 2 direct toasts from the host, a few curious glances, enough to hint at upward motion, not enough to become a threat. Perfect, but perfect doesn't last. You hear a laugh, sharp, too loud, heads turn. A younger guest, drunk beyond grace, is teasing a matron far above his station. Her smile freezes. A heartbeat later, the host speaks, not to him, but about him, addressing no one in particular. A mouth that moves faster than the brain, he says. It's a pity when beauty outpaces breeding. The laugh dies. A few chuckles ripple. The youth stammers something. Then silence. He's not thrown out. That would be vulgar. But he won't be back. This too is a kind of seduction. The seductive use of humiliation. A demonstration that favor is fragile. And you're reminded that this room, for all its perfume and poetry, is still a battlefield. The weapons just happen to be cushions, glances, and slightly parted lips. Someone proposes a game. It's not a game. Each guest must offer a compliment to the person on their left. One that reveals no names, no body parts, and no direct promises. You watch it unfold like a jewel. One man describes his neighbor's ability to bloom under low light. Another praises the artistry of restraint. Someone jokes about a gaze sharper than any senator's dagger. The room laughs. When it's your turn, you look to the woman beside you. She's older, but her eyes are unreadable, and her rings tell stories you can't begin to guess. You smile, then say, "Your silences say more than most speeches." A pause, then her fingers brush your forearm. And your restraint is both admirable and temporary. There it is. You're in the game. You remember now that in Rome, seduction was often public. Not the act itself, but the negotiation. Being seen flirting, seen being wanted, seen wanting, it was currency. To be pursued meant you had value. To pursue meant you had ambition. To do both, skillfully, meant you understood how power actually worked. One fringe historian claims that some hosts deliberately mismatched guests, placing rivals side by side, former lovers across from each other, potential matches close enough to smell each other's skin. Not out of cruelty, out of curiosity. What would happen? What alliances might crack under pressure? What new desires might be born? And if scandal happened, even better, because scandal too was a tool. Reputation at these events wasn't just earned by grace and charm. Sometimes it was carved out of chaos. A clever retort, a perfectly timed sigh, a touch interpreted 3 different ways by 3 different people. That could reshape how you're discussed in the baths tomorrow morning, and how you're remembered next month in a Senate vote. A slave refills your cup, then pauses to adjust the pillow behind your back. You didn't ask. You murmur a thank you. They nod once and disappear. Everything here is symbolic, even kindness, especially kindness. You overhear a senator whisper to someone, "He offered me the fig with his right hand." The person nods slowly, understanding the reference. Apparently that's a signal of something. Loyalty, intention. You've never been quite sure. But then, understanding everything isn't the goal. It's being seen trying. Someone plays a lyre. The melody is soft, circular, almost hypnotic. You're floating now, half draped on your couch, skin warmed by the wine, mind trailing behind the flicker of torchlight. You're not sure what time it is. It doesn't matter. The host rises, not fully, just a shift in posture, enough for the room to tilt around him. He gestures lazily to the harpist, then to a guest across the room. A private joke. Everyone laughs. You do too. It's almost dawn. But no one's going anywhere yet, because here, in this low-lit room of silk and suggestion, power is still in play, and desire. Desire is simply how power breathes. The first sign that the night is ending is the silence. Not total, but soft. Like the hush that falls after a story concludes, or the space between the final chord and applause. Conversations slow. The laughter, still present, fades into breathy murmurs. Plates are no longer being replaced. Wine is offered only once more. The dancers have disappeared. Even the torches seem to dim themselves, flickering low as if bowing out. You're still reclined, your limbs pleasantly heavy, skin warm beneath your tunic. The oil has seeped into everything. Your pause, your pulse, your perception of time. You blink slowly, and across the table someone is watching you. Not a leer, just a knowing glance. You hold it a second too long. Or maybe just long enough, and then movement. Servants emerge again, this time carrying shallow basins of rose water and linen cloths. One kneels before each guest, offering the bowl with bowed head. You wash your hands slowly, letting the warmth return, feeling to your fingertips. The cloth is soft and damp, the scent sharp and clean. A symbolic cleansing, perhaps, of more than just grease and grape juice. There's no formal goodbye, no bell rung. Guests begin to rise in staggered patterns. Some lean in for a whispered exchange. Others brush past with fingertips trailing down each other's backs. You see 3 pairs slip away toward a curtained hallway. No one stops them, because this too is part of the night. The banquet doesn't end when the food does. It ends in shifts, in silk rustling against marble, in the patter of bare feet disappearing down polished corridors, in the lingering scent of figs, musk, and myrrh. You stand, slowly. Your legs are stiff, but your spine stays straight. You've survived. You've performed. No slurred speech, no spilled wine, no embarrassing laughter. You even earned 2 lingering looks, a whispered compliment, and a casual touch that might have meant everything or nothing. Historians often debate what these banquets truly meant. Were they about indulgence, diplomacy, escapism, all of the above? Probably. But the one thing they all seem to agree on is this: nothing was accidental. The host's choices, the seating order, the menu, the music, the curve of every hip, the angle of every lamp, every detail whispered something. And what survives today? Not much. A few mosaics, a poem here or there, scratched graffiti in a Pompeii bathhouse about who wore what and who left with whom. The ruins are silent now, but they were never quiet back then. You pass through the atrium, where the fountain still burbles, the water cool and pink with scattered rose petals. A few guests linger there, pretending to chat, pretending not to wait for someone. Outside, the sun has not quite risen, but the sky is that soft Roman blue, just before it burns gold. You inhale the air, cool, slightly damp, tinged with the iron scent of stone. Behind you, the villa still breathes. The servants are cleaning. The torches are being snuffed. Somewhere, linens are being changed. And a reputation, somewhere in that room, is either being destroyed or reborn. You adjust your tunic, one last glance behind. No one calls your name. Perfect. Because what matters now isn't what was seen, it's what will be said. By noon, someone will have exaggerated a touch into a scandal. By evening, your name may be whispered in the baths, on a bench, over a board game, paired with a raised eyebrow and the word impressive, or not. Either way, you were there, and Rome will remember. Your body grows heavier with each passing moment, and the world around you falls quiet, like a town long abandoned. The past is no longer far away. It sits beside you now, breathing softly, waiting. You don't need to do anything but listen. Let your thoughts drift like leaves in slow water. We're not finished yet. The next part is just beginning to unfold. We slip into a slower, stranger rhythm, the kind only candlelight and too much wine can create. You're standing in the middle of a bustling Roman forum just before dusk. Stone underfoot still radiates the day's heat. Statues loom like judges above the crowd. And there, near a column carved with spirals, someone looks at you. Not a glance, a stare. Unblinking, bold, maybe a little too long. Welcome to flirtation, Roman style, where subtlety is optional. Staring contests are strategic. And yes, you probably wouldn't survive the social stakes of this ancient dating game. You spot them again. Their gaze doesn't waver. In modern times, you'd label it creepy. But here, in Rome, it's the equivalent of swiping right, minus the screen, and with a much higher chance of their cousin watching from a balcony. You shift your toga ever so slightly. Not much, just enough to show a forearm or smooth a fold. It's like saying, I see you too, but without a word. Flirting in ancient Rome starts with looking. That's not just poetic, it's legal. Roman laws prohibited married women from mingling too freely with men in private, but out in public, especially in busy markets or at temples, the eyes did most of the talking. Public benches weren't just for sitting. They were hot zones for lingering, waiting, and pretending to people watch while actually scoping out someone else's spouse. And don't assume it's all about men pursuing women. Roman poets tell a messier story. Women flirt, wink, flirt back. Ovid, the original love guru, insists that the circus is the best place to meet someone, mostly because of all the physical jostling and accidental hand brushes. You imagine sitting down beside someone as horses thunder past and crowds roar. You lean close to say something clever, but the noise drowns you out, so you lean closer, and now they smell your hair. That's not just detail. It was a common theme in Roman romantic poetry. Hair, breath, and scent were crucial in this game. You bathe in oils laced with myrrh or cinnamon. You hope it masks the garlic. You may even burn perfume on your skin, knowing how closely your admirer might lean. There's a reason Romans burned incense in bedrooms and rubbed petals on their wrists, and yet, everything is risk. You're watched constantly. Gossip moves faster than chariot wheels. Flirting in public might get you noticed. Flirting too boldly might get you noticed by the wrong husband, or worse, his patron. And if you're a man, glancing too long at another man's wife or male companion could end in an awkward duel or a very permanent exile from dinner invitations. Even the flick of a fan or the way someone sipped their wine could be decoded. One Roman historian jokes that the city had more love codes than it had roads. According to fringe scholars and some very dramatic poets, lovers even developed silent eyebrow languages. Raise one, interest, raise both, alarm, blink slowly, desire, blink rapidly, probably dust, but who knows? And then there's the toga. Oh, the toga. For men, it's all about the drape. An off-the-shoulder look might say, I'm a little relaxed tonight. A neatly folded hem shouts, I have money and self-respect. For women, it was more complicated. The stola, that traditional Roman dress, was reserved for respectable wives. If you weren't wearing one, it didn't necessarily mean you were single. It just meant society was already whispering. That, or you were working the crowd for more than conversation. But even with all the rules, a well-timed glance could still light fires. Historians still argue whether these public displays were genuinely romantic or simply strategic. Was it real affection? Or just two people calculating status and opportunity? You don't know. But when someone smiles at you across the marble bathhouse entry and adjusts their cloak just so, you feel something stir. You wonder a bit. The forum grows louder. A musician plucks a tune in the background. Somewhere, a politician shouts about grain prices, but your attention keeps returning to that one person. You do what Romans do best: linger, stall. Maybe buy a pomegranate you don't need. Maybe offer it to them, casually, like it wasn't planned. They accept. No words yet. Just a fruit passed between palms, warm from the sun. You're officially in flirtation territory, and believe it or not, this is the easy part. The real work, the letters, the games, the endless waiting, comes next. The next morning, you wake up thinking about them. Their smile, the way their fingers brushed yours when they took the pomegranate. You try not to replay it obsessively, but of course you do. And now comes the harder part. Communication. You're in ancient Rome, remember? No phones, no texts, no you up at midnight. If you want to reach someone, you'll have to get creative, or get a slave to do it for you. That's right. In this world, delivering love notes is someone's actual job. Wealthy Romans often used their household slaves as living mailboxes, sending them trotting across the city with little wax tablets bearing personal messages. You might scratch out a coy line or two, something poetic maybe, or something cheeky. Nice pomegranate. Want another? Then you hand it off to your poor, overworked messenger, who's probably rolling their eyes as they head out, dodging carts and fishmongers. If you're clever, you write in code. Latin is flexible like that. Lovers used abbreviations, reversed letters, or wrote acrostic verses, hiding secret meanings within each line. One fringe theory claims that some lovers even had their own alphabets, known only to them, scratched onto bits of bone or broken pottery. It's a little dramatic, but hey, when your crush lives across town and their father has a reputation for stabbing suitors, a little encryption never hurts. But writing is just one part of the game. If you're really serious, you start quoting poetry, especially from the greats like Catullus or Propertius. These guys didn't just write about love, they lived it. Obsessed, whined, pined. One of them even wrote 30 poems to a woman who ghosted him repeatedly and possibly never existed. That's some strong ancient simp energy. You scratch out a few lines that sound just tortured enough to be intriguing. Something like, I burn for you as Vesuvius sleeps, quiet on the outside, fire within. You wince. It's dramatic, but also kind of works. You send it, and now you wait. Meanwhile, if you're wealthy, you might casually show up near their house under the pretense of visiting a friend. You're hoping for a glimpse, a reaction, anything. You maybe leave a flower near their door. If they're bold, they might step out onto the balcony and pretend to scold their servant for dropping laundry, while making sure you get a full view of their new hairstyle. Coincidence? Not a chance. For the middle classes, flirting means seizing whatever opportunity you can. You both shop at the same market? Great. Loiter. You pass the same fountain every morning. Time your walks. And if you're a baker's daughter, maybe you accidentally give your admirer the biggest loaf. Don't laugh. It worked more often than you'd think, and sometimes the writing's not on the tablet. It's on the wall. Literally. Graffiti was Rome's version of social media, especially in places like Pompeii. You can still read messages today carved or painted onto tavern walls. I love Hermeros. Crescent slept here alone and cried. Secundus likes to kiss boys. It's all there. Crude declarations, passive-aggressive shade, and the ancient equivalent of subtweeting. You imagine wandering the city and spotting your own name scribbled in red paint beside a heart. Or worse, beside a donkey. Because in Roman slang, donkeys were a euphemism for, well, let's just say your IQ wasn't being complimented. But beyond writing, voice mattered. Romans believed the way someone spoke could ignite attraction. If your voice was soft and well-trained, people noticed. Some elite women even hired tutors to coach them in elegant speech. It was the opposite of shouting over a dance floor. Picture a whispered phrase, slow and practiced, echoing under a stone archway. Historians still argue whether most lovers composed their own lines or borrowed them from professional poets for hire. There are even records of clients commissioning seductive verse to win over specific targets. You picture some poor writer hunched over a wax slab, muttering, "What rhymes with Sabina has great ankles." The idea of flirting by proxy wasn't always optional. For more modest or high-status women, direct conversation with suitors could be dangerous or scandalous. Instead, you'd speak through others, maids, tutors, even musicians. Imagine sending someone to serenade your crush on your behalf, strumming a lyre outside their home while you wait, holding your breath behind a pillar. But sometimes, words weren't needed. You'd make eye contact during a banquet, hold the gaze a little too long, then raise your cup with a smirk. Maybe you'd tap your finger slowly on the rim 3 times. If they tap back, game on, of course. Not every message gets through. Maybe your note is intercepted. Maybe your messenger is bribed. Or maybe they just don't write back. That quiet ache in your chest. That's ghosting. A Roman specialty. And the poets had no chill about it. Entire scrolls are dedicated to the agony of waiting for someone who never answers. One poet even claimed he fell ill from unreceived correspondence. In modern terms, that's like calling in sick because your crush didn't like your story. You start to feel it too. You pass their house again. No sign. The flower you left has withered. Your messenger says they weren't home. You write another note, shorter this time. You hesitate before sending it. You rewrite it. Then you throw it in the brazier. But just as you're starting to give up, a knock at your door. It's your slave. He's holding a wax tablet. It smells faintly of rose oil. And suddenly, the whole city feels quieter. You barely let the slave finish speaking before snatching the tablet from his hand. Your thumb trembles slightly as you crack open the thin wooden cover. It's not long. Just a few lines. But it's in her hand. Or his. Their handwriting soft and slanted, wax curling under a practiced stylus. One word stands out. Come. The address is tucked beneath. A curt formality. It's their uncle's villa in Trastevere. Secluded, behind ivy-covered walls and olive groves. It's not a trap. Probably. Just an invitation. Your stomach flips the way it does before a storm. Now you've got a bigger problem. What do you wear? In Roman courtship, your appearance was half the conversation. Everything was symbolic. You rifle through your wardrobe. Tunics, cloaks, togas. Ugh. No one wears a toga unless they have to. You want to look effortless, not like you're giving a speech in the Senate. So you settle on a fine linen tunic, just short enough to flatter the calves. Romans were really into calves, oddly enough. You dab on perfume, maybe myrrh or cinnamon oil, if you're feeling bold. Not too much. You don't want to smell like a merchant's cart. And for jewelry, a subtle ring. Or maybe the locket that opens to reveal a tiny carved dove. Subtle, suggestive, classy. As you make your way through the winding streets, you notice others sizing you up. That's the thing about Rome. You're always being watched. Flirting here is a public sport. The way your belt is knotted. The way your hair is oiled or left loose. These aren't personal choices. They're signals. Take hair, for example. Roman women curled theirs into intricate styles to showcase wealth and patience. A woman with a head full of ringlets likely sat for hours with a hairdresser and 3 assistants. One elite wrote that a woman's hair was her true letter of intent. If she wore it pinned high, it meant dignity. If she wore it low, over one shoulder, well, you can guess. Men had their own grooming rituals. A close shave, oiled beard, neat fringe, but not too neat, or you risked looking like a boy toy. It was a balance. Polished, but not vain. Kind of like posting a selfie that screams, "I didn't try," even though you absolutely did. As you near the villa, your heart races. The gate creaks open before you knock. Inside, a narrow path lined with cypress trees leads you to a shaded atrium. The fountain gurgles softly. You're told to wait. You pretend to admire the mosaic under your feet. A scene of Narcissus admiring his reflection. Cute. And then, they arrive. You barely recognize them at first. They've dressed for the occasion too. But more importantly, they're smiling. And that smile doesn't just say hello. It says, "I read your poetry. I liked it. I thought about you." You sit beneath a vine-covered trellis. Fresh figs are placed on the table, next to a dish of honeyed almonds. And then, out of nowhere, a lyre. Not that either of you is playing it. Someone's just strumming lazily in the background. Very casual, very staged. Conversation is slow at first. You talk about the weather, the street theater, that senator who slipped on olive oil at the forum. But gradually the walls come down, and soon you're talking about dreams. Not big, world-changing ones, Rome is too cynical for that. But little ones, like keeping bees, or escaping to Capua, or owning a dog that doesn't bark at thunder. And somehow, those tiny dreams feel more honest than any love letter ever could. A pause. They look at you and ask, "Do you believe in omens?" You freeze. Not because it's weird, but because that's the most Roman question they could have asked. You see, ancient Romans loved a good omen. A sneeze at the wrong time could ruin a date. A crow landing on the left side of the garden. Cancel everything. Some even consulted augurs before courtship. If the birds didn't fly in the right formation, they'd delay the entire romance. Talk about blaming the pigeon. French sources claim couples sometimes tested their compatibility by casting knuckle bones, tiny dice made from animal joints. Certain throws meant harmony, others meant disaster. It's like a Tinder swipe with bones. Historians still debate whether this was sincere belief or just a clever excuse to bail. Sorry, darling, the bones said no. But back to your villa. You both laugh about omens. But something's shifted. The conversation lingers. Shoulders tilt closer. A figure's offered. Slowly. Your fingers brush. Again. And then you notice something strange. Their sandals are off. This is subtle, but in Roman culture, removing your shoes indoors was more than etiquette. It could be a sign of trust or invitation. Not necessarily scandalous, but suggestive. Like leaving your door slightly ajar. You hesitate, you sip wine, you talk about gladiators. Did you know many of them wore their hair long, specifically because it made them look more desirable? That some had fan clubs? That the Emperor Commodus staged fights just to flirt from the arena floor? You pretend to find it funny, but your mind keeps drifting. What now? You're not sure if you should make a move, or if they already have. Or if this is one of those tests where you're supposed to read between everything. You lean back, their eyes follow, and just before the silence gets too heavy, they reach for your hand. Not dramatically, not like in the plays. Just quietly, as if to say, I'm here. I want this too. You smile, and Rome, for a moment, stops spinning. The next morning, everything feels a little too bright. You wake to the sound of street vendors shouting about lentils and leeks, and the dull clatter of hooves on cobblestone. Your head hums, not from wine, but from possibility. There's a letter on your doorstep. You pretend not to notice it for a while, just to stretch the suspense. But of course you open it. They write like they speak. A little clipped, a little careful, but the sentiment glows through. They mention last night. They mention your smile. And at the very bottom, there's a line that reads, "Same time, next week." You exhale, but don't get too comfortable. This is still ancient Rome, where ghosting, yes, that ghosting, existed long before smartphones or flaky Tinder dates. It even had a name. Desidia. A kind of calculated silence, usually blamed on divine signs, sudden omens, or the business of the Republic. Classic. Romans weren't immune to disappearing acts. Sometimes a lover would simply stop sending letters, or conveniently travel to the countryside for a few weeks. One poet wrote bitterly about a woman who, after a week of intense glances and stolen figs, pretended she'd never seen him before. Cold. But the thing is, you can't just ghost quietly in Rome. Social circles are tight, gossip flows faster than the Tiber, and servants love to talk. You'd hear whispers in the bathhouse, sideways glances at the theatre. You might even receive a public poem, passive-aggressive of course, scribbled on a wall, naming you as the heartless vanisher. And let's not forget the poets. Oh, the poets. If Roman romance had a soundtrack, it'd be the scratch of styluses on wax. Ovid, Catullus, Propertius. They didn't just write about love, they weaponized it. A sweet verse today, a venomous elegy tomorrow. It was a culture where you flirted with metaphors and broke up in hexameter. Take Catullus, for instance. He was utterly obsessed with a woman he called Lesbia. At first, it's all roses and doves. But then she spurns him. And suddenly, he's writing lines like, I hate and I love. Perhaps you ask why I do so. I do not know. But I feel it. And I am in torment. Relatable. Some fringe theories even claim these poets used coded language to insult rivals or former lovers without naming names. A dig about someone's slow chariot might actually mean they were bad in bed. Yikes. Historians still argue whether Roman ghosting was considered cruel or just part of the game. Some suggest it was even expected, that love, to be real, had to be tested by distance and silence. Others think it was just plain cowardice, in a tunic. Back in your world, you're still unsure. You've replied to their note, kept things breezy. But what now? Are you courting? Are you lovers? Are you just two people who like olives and well-placed glances? In Rome, labels are slippery. Marriage is serious business. It's about property, alliances, children, and legacy. Love is something else. Something in between. Something dangerous even. Remember, elite Roman men weren't supposed to fall in love. That was for Greeks, or women, or actors. A senator obsessed with someone. Scandalous. Undignified. Bad for optics. So they did what everyone does when they care too much but can't admit it. They performed indifference. Carefully orchestrated neglect. A gift. Followed by silence. A smile. Then distance. It's romantic chicken. Ancient style. That week stretches. They don't write again. You pretend you're fine. You go to the baths, hoping not to see them, and hoping exactly to see them. You loiter near their favorite bakery, just long enough for a chance encounter. It doesn't come. And then, just when you've decided to give up, a slave finds you at the market, hands you a tiny scroll. It reads, "The moon is waning, so am I, come." That's it. You rush. The moon is indeed low, slipping like silver behind terracotta roofs. Their house is darker this time, quieter. No music, no figs. You find them sitting alone in the garden, hair unpinned, one sandal missing. They've been crying, you think. But don't say it. They smile anyway. They explain. Slowly. An uncle disapproves. A cousin needs arranging. A marriage proposal is on the table. Not from you. You nod. You understand. Even if you don't. This is Rome. Love bends to politics, to bloodlines, to the whims of fortune. You know that. Still, it stings. But you don't leave. You stay. You talk through the night. About nothing and everything. About Egyptian bees and cursed rings and that one senator who drinks too much garum. You hold hands. Just for a moment. You don't ask for more. And when the sun starts to rise, you both know it's the end. Or maybe not. Rome is full of comebacks. Old flames, new excuses. People change their minds more than emperors change tunics. Maybe they'll write again. Maybe they won't. Either way, you'll survive. You're Roman. And in this city, love isn't always meant to last. But oh, when it does, it becomes legend. Days pass, then weeks, and life, being life, keeps flowing. You spend your mornings at the baths, scrubbing off yesterday's sweat and other people's gossip. Your afternoons drift between the forum and your favorite bookshop, the one with the cracked marble lion out front and the scrolls that always smell faintly of pine. At night, you eat alone. Not sadly, just differently. You chew more slowly. You notice the texture of the olives. You remember when a glance across the table made the whole world feel like it might tip. But Rome is a city that doesn't let you linger. There's always another invitation, another neighbor's dinner party, another debate about grain prices or whether Jupiter is actually mad at the city this week. And then, one evening, you're invited to a wedding. Not just any wedding, but theirs. Yes, that wedding. Apparently the cousin's marriage deal went through. You weren't mentioned in the announcement, but your name is surely whispered in the margins. A last-minute addition to the guest list. You get a front-row seat to what could have been. The villa is grand, draped in saffron-colored cloth, perfumed with burning cinnamon bark and sweet resin. The bride wears a flame-colored veil, the flammium, said to ward off bad omens and bad memories. She steps lightly, eyes down, perfect. The groom looks like someone trying not to look smug. You sip watered wine and nod at passing senators and remind yourself to smile. Love in Rome, you now know, doesn't always end in union. Sometimes it ends in applause, in rituals, in knowing when to bow out gracefully before history forgets your part in the story. There were other kinds of endings too. The breakups that came by decree. Did you know a Roman woman could initiate divorce simply by telling her husband she was leaving? No trial, no priest, no paperwork. Just pack up her dowry and walk out. The law said so. And sometimes, she took the dog. That's the thing about Roman relationships. They weren't just emotional. They were legal constructs. Inheritance, status, alliances, even custody of the family laures, the little household gods. Who gets which statue? Who keeps the ancestral mask collection? Historians still argue whether most marriages were truly about companionship or simply civic duty done in sandals. But in private, behind closed doors, when the lights dimmed and the poetry stopped, that's where the truth lived. A truth you still carry. Because love in Rome, even when it fades, doesn't fully leave you. It leaves little fingerprints on the hem of your toga, on a song that reminds you of their laugh, on a phrase they once used that you now accidentally say. You don't see them again for a long time, but you hear things. They visit Baiae in the spring. They donate to a temple on the Aventine. One night, you hear they wrote a poem, anonymously published of course, about a lost love who once laughed too loudly at a dinner party. And you wonder, could that be you? Of course. The city never stops turning. You flirt again. You lose again. You walk past the same alley twice and feel two completely different things each time. The ghosts stay quiet mostly, except on festival nights when the wine is cheap and someone sings an old song that cuts a little too deep. Still, you're not sad, just seasoned, and maybe a little sharper at spotting the early warning signs when someone writes too carefully, when a gift comes too soon. You're a Roman now. You've loved like a Roman. Lost like one too. You still keep that note though. The one that said, "The moon is waning, so am I." Folded between pages of Horace. Sometimes, when the wind whistles in just the right way, you swear you can still smell their skin on it. Cypress and candle wax, and a little smoke from that garden fire. Maybe you never really recover from a Roman romance. Maybe that's the point. Because here, in this city of marble and ash, of baths and betrayals, nothing is meant to last. But everything is meant to be remembered. You lie awake that night. The city sleeps. The aqueduct hums. Somewhere, a lyre plucks out a melody too soft to place. And in your mind's eye, they smile again. Not in longing, not in regret. Just recognition of something that once was, of something still beautiful, of something forever Roman. The lines between then and now begin to blur. You can almost feel the stone floors under your feet, hear the whisper of robes, the hush of candlelit corridors. Time has slowed, and so have you. Don't fight the stillness. Just sink into it. There's more to see, more to remember. Let's keep going. Gently, we slip quietly through a torchlit alleyway in ancient Rome. The moon is pale above the terracotta rooftops, and somewhere nearby, someone's cat knocks over a wine jug. Just a little reminder that danger and mystery go hand in hand. You duck beneath a cloth awning, sandals soft on the dusty cobblestones, and ahead of you is a woman wrapped in a dark cloak. She pauses at a crossroads, glances behind her, doesn't see you, and then ducks into a shadowed courtyard. She's here to cast a spell, and you're about to see something most Roman citizens only whispered about behind closed doors. The woman pulls a small lead tablet from her bag, etched with tiny, careful letters. She reads it aloud in a whisper, each syllable laced with longing and frustration. The name of her beloved, one Gaius, appears 3 times. His fidelity is in question, or maybe he never even noticed her. Regardless, she wants him cursed. Not harmed, necessarily, just bound, a little obsessed, a little unable to sleep unless her name passes through his thoughts. The spell calls upon chthonic deities, dark underworld figures like Hecate or Pluto, and she folds the tablet before tucking it into a small crack in the wall of the courtyard shrine. Lead curse tablets, deficciones, were surprisingly common in the Roman world. Archaeologists have unearthed hundreds, sometimes still curled up like silver licorice rolls. These weren't always about love, of course. Some were for victory in court cases or to smite enemies in a chariot race. But love curses had their own flavor. They often included phrases like, "Let him burn with desire," or "Let her not eat, drink, or sleep without me." Some were more aggressive, threatening rivals, begging the gods to rot someone's insides, or requesting infertility for a romantic competition. You know, casual stuff. It's easy to imagine this practice as something only the lower classes did. But even elite Roman women, educated, wealthy, and seemingly in control, were not above dabbling in magic when love became complicated. Historians still argue whether these rituals were believed to truly summon supernatural intervention, or whether they were more psychological, helping the person casting them feel some kind of control in a chaotic emotional storm. The ritual isn't done yet. From her satchel, she pulls out a small pouch of herbs, lovage perhaps, or crushed myrtle, associated with Venus. She sprinkles them onto a flame, inhaling the smoke. Then, from another pouch, a lock of her own hair. Hair was powerful, intimate, dangerous. Bound with love spells, it could symbolically tie one soul to another. Or, if burned in the wrong hands, it could undo you entirely. The wind picks up slightly. A distant dog barks. She glances up again, nervous now. Casting love spells wasn't exactly illegal, but it danced close to the line. Roman law frowned upon sorcery that could interfere with the natural will of another. Still, it was hard to prove, and even harder to resist when your heart ached. And when the usual routes, flirting at the baths, dropping hints over dinner, failed, the gods were always a backup plan. One famous story tells of a Roman woman so desperate for a lover's attention that she carved his name onto a wax figure, tied it up with leather cords, and left it beneath a grave marker. A sort of magical hostage situation. If you're imagining a puppet or a voodoo doll, you're not far off. The practice had regional variations, and wax was a common medium, soft and easy to mold. And hey, if you're going to curse someone, might as well make it artistic. Some rituals required blood, others involved wine, honey, or bodily fluids we won't detail right now, because you're trying to sleep. Let's just say Roman magic was a full-body experience. Some spells even instructed the practitioner to call out the target's name at dawn, or while staring into a mirror. A hauntingly modern image if you've ever whispered someone's name to the ceiling at 3 a.m. and wondered what they were doing without you. The woman finishes her ritual. She presses her hand to the little shrine wall and mutters a final prayer. It's not a grand temple, just a local household deity spot, a lararium. These were common. Every home had one. But tonight, it becomes a sacred space of longing and manipulation. Then she's gone, cloak fluttering behind her, heels brushing against the uneven stones. She won't know if it worked. Not really. But in the meantime, she can sleep. Maybe better than Gaius will. Later, you pass that same shrine. The air smells faintly of smoke and lavender. A faint scraping sound echoes nearby. Another person maybe, adding their own tablet. It seems there's no shortage of a heartbreak in ancient Rome, and there's something oddly comforting in that. Their problems, for all the togas and Latin poetry, weren't so different from yours. They wanted to be seen, to be loved. And when that didn't happen, well, they got creative. You linger near the edges of the forum, where marble columns glow faintly under a waxing moon. The crowds are long gone, replaced by shadows and the occasional flicker of a torch held by a passing guard. But not far from the Senate House, a quieter kind of power is being woven. Less about politics, more about perfume and silver rings. This is where the amulet peddlers set up shop. By day, they sell to anyone with a coin. By night, their goods are tucked into private palms, exchanged for secrets and whispered advice. You stop by a small wooden cart draped with dyed linen. The merchant is an older woman with gold-threaded hair and far too many rings. She gestures to a tray of objects. Tiny phallus charms, miniature hands carved from bone, a lump of amber shaped like a fish. Her voice is hoarse but kind, as she explains, one by one, what each trinket claims to do. Here, she says, is a lunula, a crescent moon pendant, worn mostly by girls to ward off evil. Over there, a phallus-shaped fascinum to protect you from envy, illness, and weirdly, too much attention. Yes, in the Roman world, even penises were good luck, especially when they had wings or bells attached. The bigger, the better. One prankster even hung a wind chime of them on his front door. You imagine his neighbors didn't sleep much. Amulets weren't just jewelry. They were wearable prayers. Some were explicitly romantic. A stone engraved with Ab Amando meant, "Let him love me." Others featured Venus herself, or carried coded inscriptions only the wearer understood. Some were meant to attract, others to protect from obsession. In a world where love could so easily turn into jealousy, or worse, a public scandal, these talismans were emotional insurance policies. Children wore them. Gladiators wore them. Even emperors weren't above tucking a little carnelian in their tunics if they thought it might help with charm or fertility. Emperor Augustus reportedly carried a piece of sealskin to ward off lightning. Now, whether that worked or not is up for debate. But it's comforting to imagine the ruler of the Roman world nervously fingering a lucky charm every time it rained. Historians still argue whether these amulets were more spiritual or social. Were they real belief systems or cultural habits passed down without question? It's tricky. Some amulets were buried with the dead, suggesting deep meaning. Others were churned out in bulk, like souvenirs. A bit like the difference between a heartfelt friendship bracelet and a mass-produced best dad mug. You step away from the cart, the older woman nodding at you as if to say, choose wisely. Around your neck now hangs a new talisman, an eye-shaped bulla strung on leather. It feels warm, almost humming. Is it magic? Maybe. Or maybe you just like the way it makes you feel. Some amulets weren't worn at all, but hidden, sewn into pillows, placed beneath thresholds, even ground into powders and slipped into drinks. Though, obviously, that last one raises questions about consent. But Roman love was complicated. Women especially had to work around social restrictions. Direct flirtation could be frowned upon, so they found quieter ways to express desire, or to protect themselves from the consequences of it. One common charm involved engraving the words Vitere Felix, used with luck, onto rings. These rings weren't always exchanged between lovers. Sometimes they were worn to invite attention, other times to signal availability in a way that avoided gossip. You could say the Romans invented the soft launch. Then there's the matter of color. Red was the go-to for love charms, bold, visceral, symbolic of blood and fire. But blue stones, like lapis lazuli, were used too, believed to calm jealousy and balance fiery emotions. Basically, your whole love life could be curated through accessories, like an ancient version of mood rings, only with more mythological baggage. At one point, a man passes by, clutching a small pouch. He's clearly hiding it. The way he walks, the way he glances around, it's obvious he's nervous. You follow at a distance, not too close. When he reaches a fountain, he takes something from the pouch and tosses it into the water. A votive offering, possibly to Venus, maybe to Aphrodite. The names blurred often, as Greek and Roman beliefs tangled over centuries. He whispers something too faint to catch. Maybe a request, maybe a warning. Then he walks away briskly, shoulders tight. You get the sense this wasn't a joyful love. Maybe it used to be. But not anymore. Nearby, an inscription on the fountain reads, "Noli me tangere," do not touch me. It's unclear whether it's addressed to the water, the goddess, or someone very real and very unwanted. The boundaries between sacred and personal in Roman romance were blurry. Love wasn't always flowers and poetry. Sometimes it was iron nails and spit, and the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, would see you. Even in the wealthiest villas, among mosaics and gold goblets, you'd find amulets tucked beneath cushions or hidden in jewelry boxes. Because even if you had everything, love could still be slippery. Especially if you were expected to marry for status, not passion. A senator's daughter might wear a ring carved with Amor vincit omnia, love conquers all, but also keep a little onyx charm that said, keep her faithful, just in case. You sit now by a quiet column, fingers brushing the bulla at your neck. The marble is cool. The night stretches long. Somewhere, a woman unwraps a bundle of herbs in secret. Somewhere else, a man carves a lover's name into a wooden box and buries it in his garden. The empire pulses with desire, anxiety, hope, and betrayal, all wrapped in silver charms and whispered words. You're not alone in wanting love to last, or to begin, or just to behave a little better. And sometimes, all it takes is a trinket. You drift now toward the cramped alleys behind the bakeries, where laundry flaps from upper windows and the smells of flour, ash, and goat tallow hang thick in the night air. This is the less polished part of Rome. Less marble, more mildew. But here is where the real stories bubble. Not in the Senate, not at the races, but in the kitchens and courtyards where people whisper secrets and stare too long at someone else's spouse. Jealousy, in Rome, isn't just a passing mood. It's a recognized threat, a force worth protecting yourself from, like the plague or public embarrassment. And just like with love, the Romans turned to magic. But these spells weren't the fluttery kind. They were sharp, often angry, protective if you were lucky, vengeful if you weren't. You watch as a young woman ducks into a dim doorway, clutching a scroll. She's not a priestess. Just a housemaid with a problem. Maybe the man she fancies keeps smiling at her older sister. Or maybe her husband has started spending too much time at the public baths. Either way, she's carrying a defixio, a curse tablet. These were real. Thin sheets of lead, etched with names, wishes and commands, then folded and nailed shut. Sometimes they were pierced with iron nails. Other times, weighted down with hair or bits of thread soaked in menstrual blood. Sexy? No. Effective? Well, depends who you ask. You peer over her shoulder, quietly, respectfully. The scroll reads something like, "Let Gaius feel restless. Let him desire only me. Let him not sleep until he returns." Harsh. Sure, but also painfully human. The desperate need to be wanted, to undo the feeling of being ignored. Historians still argue whether these spells were really expected to work, or whether they were more like emotional rituals. A way to feel in control in a world where most people, especially women, weren't. Because in Roman law, a man's flirtation might be tolerated. A woman's, grounds for banishment or worse. You remember that charm you saw earlier? Keep her faithful. It's not just a cute line. Adultery was legally a crime. Augustus himself pushed morality laws that punished extramarital affairs, even exiling his own daughter Julia for violating them. She wasn't the only one. But desire doesn't care about legal codes, so people worked around it. You hear of love spells baked into loaves of bread, meant to be shared unknowingly. You hear of wine stirred with ashes from burned hair. A soldier once mailed home an amulet soaked in his sweat, meant to stir longing. That's one way to write a love letter. One fringe method involved a mirror and a candle. Light the candle, stare into your own eyes through the reflection, and chant the person's name until you lose track of time. Not exactly FDA approved, but try it sometime. Just maybe not while holding a knife. There were anti-jealousy spells too, designed to cool suspicion, calm arguments, or soften a partner's paranoia. A common charm read, "Let no evil eye fall upon us." The evil eye, Malocchio, was the catch-all villain in Roman superstition. It could spoil crops, kill babies, and yes, ruin relationships. So people wore blue beads, garlic, or phallic amulets to ward it off. You pass an older man with yellowing teeth and a wine flask. He mutters something under his breath. At first, you think he's drunk, but then you hear the rhythm. A chant, a love spell maybe, or a binding curse. It's hard to tell. The words blur together like smoke. In a tiny courtyard nearby, two women argue. One accuses the other of stealing her lover. The accused laughs, flicking olive brine at her rival and declaring, "If I had him, I wouldn't waste him like you do." Brutal, real. Entire plays were written about scenes like this. Plautus and Terence made careers staging love triangles, mistaken identities, and magical mishaps. All of it drawn from life. You think of one quirky tidbit. In some spell scrolls, people included crude drawings, stick figures usually, of the desired couple, or of a rival being dragged underground by demons. You wonder if, in some archive beneath a villa, there's a centuries-old version of a breakup meme. Curses weren't always about romance, but when they were, they went deep, into walls, into wells, even into graves. Archaeologists have found curse tablets buried beside the dead, possibly to summon the spirit as a helper. Imagine asking a ghost to handle your love life. That's bold. You move toward a market stall closed for the night. Its back wall is covered in graffiti, some crude, some sweet. One line reads, "I love the girl who stands near the gate." Another, "Don't trust Marcus. He says the same thing to all of us." And in messier script, "Venus, I'm done. Take back your arrows. Sounds like someone had a bad week. This city's obsession with desire was never gentle. The language of love was power, persuasion, possession. And sometimes, when none of that worked, magic. Crude, dangerous, heartfelt magic. You walk on, your feet sore, your new amulet swinging faintly against your chest. Somewhere behind you, that young maid is slipping her folded scroll into a clay pot, sealing it with wax and whispering a final line. You don't hear it. You're not supposed to. But you feel its weight in the air. You walk now into the wealthier districts again, but this time not for banquets. No marble atriums or perfumed slaves with honeyed figs await you here. You're heading somewhere far stranger, into the private lives of Rome's most privileged citizens, where love and obsession weren't just feelings. They were games of status, leverage, and divine manipulation. You slip into a villa garden, moonlit and meticulously trimmed. Cypress trees cast long shadows. A statue of Venus watches you from a marble pedestal, one breast chipped, one eye smudged with age. She's everywhere in this city. Venus the seducer, the matchmaker, the homewrecker. You don't so much pray to her as negotiate with her. Inside the villa, a wealthy matron lies awake. She's had too much Falernian wine, or maybe just too many thoughts. Her husband has taken a new lover, again. A freed woman this time. Not even a patrician. The insult stings more than the betrayal. And so tonight, the matron will act. Not with daggers or lawyers, but with spellwork, silk threads, and ancient chants whispered behind drawn curtains. Historians still argue whether Roman elite women actually believed in this magic, or just played along for comfort, like lighting a birthday candle and wishing for something you know that you won't get. But evidence says they didn't just believe. They curated it. One mainstream fact. Archaeological digs in Pompeii and Herculaneum have uncovered dozens of spell scrolls and magical amulets in upper-class homes, hidden in jewelry boxes or tucked behind family shrines. They weren't for show. These were lived with. You pass through her garden to a side chamber. There, a servant girl prepares a basin of rose water mixed with crushed pearls. Not for bathing. This is a love mixture. It'll be poured across a lover's doorway, meant to attract, distract, seduce, or confuse. Roman magic wasn't precise, more like emotionally targeted guesswork. Tonight's spell involves a small wax figure, male, clearly modeled after the husband. The matron pins a needle through its chest, calmly, like she's sewing, and recites a line from an old Greek incantation. It sounds like nonsense to you, but every word is weighted. May his passions turn cold. May his heart return. You don't know if it's love or ownership she's after. Probably both. The wax melts slightly in the warmth of the oil lamp. You wonder how many of these tiny effigies have been lost to time, dissolved in drawers or shattered under beds, and how many actually worked. That's the eternal question. One fringe belief popular at the time was that menstrual blood, yes, again, could be baked into cakes to bind a man's love. You imagine a dinner guest chewing nervously, trying to figure out why his fig tart tastes like iron. Other sources say used bathwater was bottled and splashed on doorways. Boundaries weren't really a Roman thing. You're drawn to a locked cabinet in the room. Inside, a silver box of love filters. Little potions, some wrapped in silk, others in glass vials sealed with wax and symbols. Some were made of relatively safe things, herbs, honey, saffron, crushed coral. Others, less so. One popular blend included bat wings, poppy seeds, and powdered bone. Think of it as a love potion / sedative / possible death wish. Not all of this was legal, by the way. Rome had anti-sorcery laws on the books, especially under Augustus and Tiberius. You could be punished for casting a spell, particularly if someone ended up dead or emotionally ruined. But the line between medicine, prayer, and magic was blurry. As long as you were discreet, and preferably rich, you'd be fine. You step into another villa, this one smaller, darker, humming with incense smoke. A man here, older, maybe a senator, sits before a mirror, chanting the name of a courtesan he can't forget. He's been married 20 years. Doesn't matter. She laughed at him last time they met, said he had the passion of a sheep. So tonight, he's reversing the energy. This spell calls for a mirror, olive oil, and his own tears. Not easy to come by if your heart's made of marble. But eventually, a few drops fall, and he whispers, "May her dreams be filled with me. May her longing break her silence." You try not to giggle. It's tragic. It's petty. It's deeply painfully human. Somewhere else in Rome, a merchant burns a papyrus scrap that reads simply, "Forget him." That's it. No divine invocation. Just a desperate hope made physical. Sometimes you don't need the gods, just fire and finality. Love magic wasn't just for the obsessed. It was for the heartbroken too. For the ones who had already lost. For the lovers who never replied. The husbands who left. The wives who changed. Some spells beg for reconciliation. Others beg to forget. And some simply ask the gods to take the pain away. Remember that bronze amulet from earlier? The one inscribed with Amor vincit omnia, love conquers all? It's not entirely true. Sometimes love lost. Sometimes it just faded. But Rome never stopped trying to force it, shape it, bind it. Even when the gods clearly weren't listening. You walk back into the moonlight now, past sleeping homes and still fountains. In a city this loud, this fevered, this endlessly hungry for beauty and control, it's no surprise that love wasn't gentle. It was war. And the battlefield was lined with wax dolls, pearl water, and whispered threats beneath silk sheets. In the distance, a rooster crows too early. Someone tosses in their sleep. Maybe they've been cursed. Maybe they've just had too much wine. You press the tiny pouch around your neck. The amulet's warmth is fading, but its message lingers. Not all magic is real, but sometimes the belief is enough. You're still awake, barely, as the sky begins to bruise with the faintest hint of morning. But we're not done yet. There's one last place to visit, one final thread to pull in this tapestry of Roman love, longing, and low-level witchcraft. Tonight, you're walking not through a villa or a bathhouse, but down into the archives of human obsession. The temples, libraries, and courtrooms where matters of the heart collided with matters of law, religion, and reputation. You enter a temple precinct at dawn, the stones still damp from dew, the air sharp with incense and goat hair. The temple of Venus Genetrix towers over you, grand, serene, and mildly terrifying. This is where Roman citizens, especially women, would sometimes leave lead tablets etched with curse spells. They weren't hidden. They were offerings. Direct appeals to the divine. One mainstream fact, over 1,000 such defixiones, binding spells, have been found across the Roman world. Many deal with stolen lovers, suspected betrayal, or romantic revenge. They'd often start politely, "Oh, divine Venus," then spiral fast into bind his loins, turn his thoughts, make her barren. Charming stuff. You pass a statue of Cupid with half his nose missing. Fitting. The god of love in Rome wasn't gentle or winged with hearts. He was a bratty child with a torch and a bow, and you were his target practice. Roman poets often describe Cupid as cruel, impulsive, and vindictive, which you have to admit sounds a lot like love itself. Now, on to the bureaucrats. Yes, even in ancient Rome, the government got involved in your romantic drama. In wealthier circles, love spells occasionally ended up in court. Not because they were illegal, necessarily, but because someone always took it too far. There are recorded cases of women being accused of sorcery to seduce married men, or, more scandalously, to influence inheritance claims. Love magic wasn't just about hearts. It was about wills, dowries, and dynasties. One juicy case involved a woman named Martina in the early 1st century CE, accused of poisoning and bewitching her way through several elite Roman households. She may or may not have actually killed anyone. Historians still argue whether Martina was a dangerous witch or a scapegoat for a misogynistic society that feared sexually autonomous women. Either way, she died mysteriously before her trial. And let's not forget the temples of Isis. Yes, Isis, the Egyptian goddess, who had a massive cult following in Rome, especially among women and the poor. Her rites were filled with secrecy, emotional ceremony, and rumors of erotic initiation. Roman officials were deeply suspicious. They even banned her cult several times, accusing it of corrupting Roman morals, which, in a city with vomitoriums and love cakes made of blood, is honestly hilarious. Still, the appeal was real. Isis promised love, fertility, and mystical connection. She offered protection where Rome gave silence. Women would leave amulets, hair, even fingernail clippings at her altar, symbolic pieces of themselves, sacrifices of intimacy. You can't help but think of all the people today who do similar things. Lockets with photos, texts never deleted, playlists full of someone you no longer speak to. You head now into a library, dusty, cold. Shelves lined with scrolls that haven't been touched since Nero was a baby. You pull one out, carefully, and unroll it. A love poem by Propertius, full of jealousy, hunger, obsession. The kind of poem that reads like someone whispering into their pillow at 2 a.m. You are mine, even in death, it says. Yikes. In another scroll, a magical recipe. Mix honey, myrrh, and powdered rose petals with a drop of your own sweat. Smear it on your lips before speaking to the one you desire. You raise an eyebrow. Sounds more like a lip balm than a curse. But who knows? Maybe that's where the power lived. In the preparation, in the performance, in believing your longing had a recipe. One fringe theory even suggests some Roman magicians used coded language to hide love spells inside recipes or religious hymns. That's right. Your grandmother's olive cake might have once been a lust potion. Add 1 fig, press to breast, bake until firm. Eventually, you step back out into the street. Rome is waking up. The carts rattle. The bakers are already sweating. And someone is shouting about fish prices. Your spell-casting matron from earlier is probably sipping watered wine and wondering if her wax doll worked. Her husband? Still snoring next to a concubine. Love, even in the ancient world, rarely went to plan. You take one last look at the city. Behind every wall, under every tile, in every locked box, Rome is full of love. Twisted, cursed, desperate love. And all of it preserved in ash, ink, and wishful thinking. And wishful, the final takeaway? Love magic in Rome wasn't just superstition. It was a language, a performance, a scream into the void. When the gods were silent, when lovers lied, when society didn't give you a voice. This was how you took it back. Not with swords, but with spells. Now let yourself drift. The marble beneath you softens. The noise of the city grows distant, muffled behind a curtain of twilight. The torches are dimming in the temples. The last flute notes from a distant tavern fade into silence. There is no urgency now. No more letters to write. No more omens to read. Just breath, slow and deep, in and out. You've wandered far tonight, through boudoirs and bathhouses, under moonlit porticos, and beside quiet fountains. You've watched lovers whisper and poets scheme. You've seen weddings, divorces, jealous spells, and quiet morning gestures that meant more than words. And now, with your eyes closed and the soft hum of a fan in the background, maybe the imagined wings of Cupid himself, you're safe, warm, wrapped in a silence as old as stone. The world can wait. The forum will still be there tomorrow. The letters can remain unsent, the omens unread. For now, let your thoughts slow to a trickle. Like rainwater down a marble drain, the city sleeps, and so do you.